Later on today's episode of On the Other Hand,
you're asking me to get on stage with Jimmy Buffett. They said, yeah, come on, we got a sign for you to hold. So they gave me one of the signs, and Stephen Stills was there playing. That's Stephen Stills.
This is On the Other Hand. A podcast sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, where courageous citizenship and common ground meet. Each episode features community leaders from Arkansas and beyond who are working to build trust across differences and to strengthen our communities by choosing engagement over division.
Hello, and welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm John O'Brien, today's co-host, here along with my co-host, Glenn White. On our podcast, we interview community leaders in Arkansas and beyond who are working towards solutions across political or other divides, and who, in other ways, try to make things better for our communities. Glenn, who do we have today?
Well, thanks, John, and welcome back to our program as co-host. Today, we have another example of people who work together despite differences to help contribute in positive ways for the community. Now, some of you may find this particular conversation to be a little different than some of the others. That's okay. We are here to talk with John Patton, who is president of the Strange Birds of Little Rock, which is Central Arkansas's official chapter of Parrot Heads in Paradise, which is the, if you haven't figured it out already, the certified national fan organization for fans of Jimmy Buffett. Joining John in this conversation is local musician and fellow Strange Bird, Paul Tull. So the Strange Birds have called Little Rock home, building a community of people that are brought together by Jimmy Buffett's music, his tropical spirit, and his belief that joy is best when it's shared. So beyond the music and the fun, the Strange Birds also live by a motto that we think will resonate with On the Other Hand listeners. Their motto is, Party with a Purpose. As a chapter of Parrot Heads in Paradise, the Strange Birds here in Little Rock have put that motto to work in Central Arkansas. That community work is one thing that drew us to invite them to talk with us, since Braver Angels, among other things, emphasizes the importance of people getting involved in their community to make things better. So I want to hear a little bit from each of you about who you are in your daily lives, just a brief bit. John, let's start with you.
Well, I'm a retired journalist / PR person, and worked in healthcare for 35 years, basically. And so also became president of the Parrot Head Club about 8 years ago. And it's one of those positions where once you get in, it may take a while before somebody runs against you. But it's been a joy, and just love the people that I get to work with when we're doing Parrot Head events.
Well, good for you for assuming the responsibility and continuing to take it on while you wait for a replacement. I know how that is. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello. I am a full-time CRNA at the Little Rock VA hospital. I've been working there about 14 years and been doing anesthesia since 2002, which was actually where I was introduced to the Parrot Head world in Orlando. That was where I did a 2-year residency at Orlando Regional Medical Center, and met some wonderful people and brought it back to Arkansas.
For listeners who aren't familiar with Parrot Heads, maybe tell us to start off with, what exactly is a Parrot Head and how did you guys start? And by the way, either of you feel free to jump in from time to time and answer that.
Hey, well, what I would generally do at this point is I'll defer to Paul, because he has a lot more of the history on Parrot Heads than I have. Even though I joined in 2008, I'm a relative newcomer to this organization. But Paul has some interesting stories that he can tell about that.
Yeah, for sure. The term Parrot Head is generally traced to a 1985 concert, a Jimmy Buffett concert near Cincinnati, Ohio. Buffett was talking about how all the fans were dressed in Hawaiian shirts and tropical gear. And Timothy B. Schmidt, the Eagles bassist, was touring with Jimmy at the time, and they both were going, "This looks like a Grateful Dead concert." That they called those guys the Deadheads, and so Timothy B. Schmidt's actually credited with coining the term Parrot Heads. We look at commonly repeated version as Buffett looked out over the crowd, that yeah, they look like tropical deadheads. So yeah, Parrot Heads is where that came from. I alluded to earlier, is in graduate school in Florida, and landed in Orlando for a couple years, and joined clubs there. We didn't have a Parrot Head club in Arkansas at the time, and when I came back home, happy to find out some paperwork had been filed, and we got our own Parrot Head club, and that would have been about 2002.
So how did you guys first discover Jimmy Buffett's music, and what about that music kind of, and that whole Parrot Head world resonated with you personally?
Well, for me, it all started when my wife and I went to a concert in Frisco, Texas. And that was back in 2008. And Frisco, Texas, among the Parrot Head world, is legendary for tailgating. It basically takes you to a whole different world. And without getting too far into it, of course, we won't have that anymore. But at that time, a lot of people loved Frisco, Texas. And we didn't know about it. We kind of came in and said, hey, it's an opportunity to catch a concert. It's not far from Dallas. And it's Jimmy Buffett. So we knew a few Jimmy Buffett songs, went down there, and I couldn't believe how friendly the people were. And we had about 30 minutes before we were going to catch the concert. And I looked at her and I said, we're going to come back here next year, and we're going to spend a lot longer than 30 minutes before the concert. So we got introduced to the Parrot Head world that way. And then, again, it was amazing how friendly everybody was. And then at the same time, we learned, hey, there's a Parrot Head club in Little Rock. We didn't know. They were flying under the radar. So,
and by the way, just back up a minute. I remember you mentioned that 1985 was when Timothy Schmidt kind of came up with the term Parrot Heads. Was that when the whole organization started, or did he just give them the name? How did that work?
I believe it was around 84 that Atlanta, there was a fan in Atlanta who we've actually, I can't recall his name, but we got to meet him. He started the first Parrot Head club in Georgia, and it just slowly grew from there.
Scott Nickerson was his name.
Scott Nickerson.
Scott Nickerson. He's still around. He was a drummer of all things. But he started that club, and next thing you know, there were more musicians gravitating toward it, and the whole trop rock music genre was born.
Cool. Okay. Do either of you have any personal moments or connections with Jimmy Buffett?
I got lucky when, again, back in Orlando, Jimmy was stumping for a fellow that was running for the Senate, and they said he's going to be at the this private hangar near the big Orlando airport. And so I took the day off and called the political headquarters and said, hey, I'd like to volunteer to help. I'm trying to do some civic work. And anyways, I got in the door that way, and they said, okay, we have some cars for you to park. And it didn't take very long to fill up the small hangar parking lot. And when I went to tell them that I was through, we'd done our chore there. They said, hey, we need some more people up on the stage. The news is going to be here, and we need it to look like a lot of people are here. And we want you to come up on the stage. And I sat there for a minute, and I said, you're asking me to get on stage with Jimmy Buffett? They said, yeah, come on. We got a sign for you to hold. So they gave me one of the signs, and I walked out through this curtain into this private hangar, and Stephen Stills was there playing. Stephen Stills. He was sitting there, and he was playing a couple of songs, and apparently he and Jimmy go way back, and it is a small world at that level, I think. And so it probably wasn't 10 or 15 minutes when a small plane started circling the hangar where we were at. We looked up, and Jimmy at that time had a very recognizable seaplane that he would fly around to events when he wanted to be noticed like that. He actually had a whole fleet of jets. We found out later that was serviced in North Little Rock. That is it, Dassault Falcon jets, I believe. He was in Little Rock a lot. Long story short, he landed. We got autographs. He walked down the stage and shook hands with everybody that was on stage, and he and Steven did a song, and he spoke a little bit and was gone. So that was kind of classic, a classic moment for me and a lifetime memory indeed.
Oh, I can believe that. That's Jimmy Buffett and Stephen Stills both at the same time. That's good.
We didn't know Steven was going to be there, so that was icing on the cake indeed.
All right. Well, I'm going to use my privilege as host to interject a little bit of a personal story here. I hope y'all don't mind. But I've not met Jimmy Buffett personally, but when I'm a little probably older than you guys. I moved for my first job to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where University of Southern Mississippi is, back in the late 70s. And at the time, I made friends, and one of the friends there told me about this singer named Jimmy Buffett, and that he's a good singer, and he's got some albums out now. You ought to hear him. Just a few years ago, when I was going to college here at USM, he would be out there playing in the student union, just for anybody to walk by, and he'd be playing. And so that was my first exposure to the idea of Jimmy Buffett, and I checked him out, liked his music, so I got a few of his albums over the years. And also, while I was down there, I saw him in concert, because since he had spent time in Hattiesburg, he came there regularly to have a concert. And actually, if you remember that song about shopping at the mini mart, it is actually the shoplifting at the mini mart. He sang that, and I remember in the concert he said, "Yeah, I swore I'd pay him back, but I never did." Those are my kind of memories about Jimmy Buffett. So I'll turn this back over to John, and I'll shut up for now.
You were Parrot Heads before you moved to the Little Rock area, but you got here, you were Parrot headed up. What made Strange Birds come about?
I'll take that one. When we moved back to Arkansas, I immediately called the director of membership, good friend Bob Heffelfinger, who's since passed, and said, "Hey, Bob, Uncle Bob, we called him. We need a Parrot Head Club in Arkansas." And he was thrilled and said, "Okay, here's the guy's name." He emailed me 2 weeks ago and started paperwork. And it was a young man that worked at Falcon Jet. He was an engineer. And at that point, we got the club rolling. I was the first vice president of the club, and eventually president for a few years. And John was so right about how you can't get rid of that, and you don't want to in some ways. But we started the club, got it chartered, got an official charter, and was having struggling meetings. It's hard to get the word out when you're a nonprofit, a new nonprofit. We had zero money except what we would kick in, and found a few people that wanted to donate and have fun. We named the club the Strange Birds of Little Rock. I alluded to Jimmy being at the airport in Little Rock quite a bit. Apparently, all the big money folks, a lot of the big money folks, bring their jets to North Little Rock to have them detailed, teak wood, things like that. I'm told lots of upgrades. And Jimmy had a fleet of jets at that time. I think there was 3, and his organization, his company was called Strange Birds, which is also the name of an album. It was registered under Strange Bird Incorporated. My friend who worked there would see Jimmy at the company a lot of times. As an engineer, he would be working in the area, and he said Jimmy was so easy to talk to as long as you didn't talk about music. He just got inundated, I think, with music conversations. But if you could talk about planes or anything, he would give you all the time of the day. But if you got off into fanboy world, it was going to be strictly a hey, thanks, man, appreciate it. So you can understand that. And so that's how Strange Birds came about. It's pretty cool. And again, I think I've got it right here. Note 1989 album, Off to See the Lizard. His song Strange Bird was on that one. So that's where we came up with the Strange Birds of Little Rock. It evolved into Central Arkansas.
Sounds like there's been quite an evolution, at least in the club here in Little Rock. How do you keep it alive? Jimmy Buffett's popularity has maybe come and gone and back up again and back down again. How do you keep the focus of the group alive?
Well, obviously, this podcast has a lot to do with community service, and so that's one of the ways that we've kept it alive over the years. We have a water station at Little Rock Marathon. It's been there probably 16 years.
Yeah, almost the whole marathon
And,
life.
Yeah, we're kind of known for that. And so we get 30 people who come out on a very cold morning usually. Because if you recall, the marathon is the first Sunday in March, and you never know what the first Sunday in March is going to mean in Arkansas. So we've been there when it's with sleet. We've been there driving rain. They'd had to call it off because of the lightning. Or it's been 70 degrees. So that's one of the ways that we do that. And we have had a lot of members who have joined the club because of our community service. So yes, we have the whole Jimmy Buffett trop rock element, and a lot of our members love the music, obviously, but they also love the community service.
That's awesome.
And, yes.
Hey, Buffett passed away, and I think in September of 23. How has the Parrot Head community responded to this loss? Is it still a topic of conversation, or is it past you now?
Well, we still feel it. When that date rolls around, we still feel it. There have been numerous different remembrance concerts, things like that with Jimmy. The song "Bubbles Up," we've used that to commemorate him in many ways. So we're still doing that, and our membership actually has grown over the last year or so. You would think that it might have fallen off over the last few years, but it has not. And mainly it's because of the trop rock music that we still reach out through different festivals all over the country, really.
I find that very enriching to hear, because great music and great performance are really forever. And sometimes there's a generational drop for a little while, but then the next young crowd comes along and goes, wow, this is great. Your club's motto is "Party with a Purpose." Tell us what that means for your club.
It's about the community service angle, and all the Parrot Head clubs have a charter. And part of the charter, back when the clubs were started, Jimmy said, yes, you can use my name. You can use the term Parrot Head, those are all copyright protected, obviously, with one condition. That condition being that you give through volunteerism, monetary donations, you give back to charity. And so that's what we've been doing, all of us, all over the country. Millions of dollars monetarily, and also millions of volunteer hours.
At minimum, we leave things a little nicer than we found them. That also works really nice into that. You see that motto at other places, but that was Jimmy's big thing. He just said he didn't want a fan club. He said no for several years, and finally the Parrot Head Club started popping up, and so that's where what John was talking about. He said, well, okay, if you're going to do this, here's what you got to do to keep it, okay with me. If I could jump back right here to that previous question about the club, at minimum we have a toast every September, and usually that involves a bar and some guitars and a crowd of people that do raise a glass. And I was told when I'm talking about how do we stay together after his passing, when I joined that club back in 2001 in Orlando, I was told by some of the folks that, hey, and a lot of them are still my friends 25 years later. They said, this is so much more than about being in Jimmy's fan club and even the music and Jimmy himself. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. Sure. Okay. And had a good time, enjoyed the activities. but truer words have never been spoken. These friendships that are now bonds of lifelong friends. And that's exactly why, as John was talking about, the club is still growing, because people want to be a part of that. They want to give back to their communities in general. They want to party with a purpose. I mean, and that can mean anything. You know, that can obviously mean going out and having, you know, cocktails and we're going to raise money. We're going to wear grass skirts and maybe a coconut bra and for donations. But there's something about the spirit of community when folks come together for a great cause, and when you help your community and you do leave things a little bit better than you found them. That's what we do. That's what our club is all about. And people from all walks of life, blue collar, white collar, unemployed. We've got school teachers, we've got nurses, doctors. We're in the club, and it's when we're all together. When I was in the Army, we all had Army green, but here we all have our tropical shirts on, and so we're all on equal footing and love each other and just have a good time.
I was just going to say, it does sound like a lot of love bleeding out of there. It's not just partying. What would you say to a current day fan of Taylor Swift when those people might say, oh, all they do is party and they don't really have anything to contribute to the community? In a sentence or two, what would you say to that person?
I would say they need to come check it out if they truly believe that. And hopefully those fans are also doing things to contribute to the community, because that's what it's all about. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And that's what Jimmy wanted us to do. And that's what we're continuing to do. And we'll hopefully do so for many, many more years to come.
That's it for part one of our conversation with John Patton and Paul Tull from the Strangebirds Group. We'll pick things up right where we left off in our next episode, so be sure to join us for part two.
If you liked what you heard today, share the episode with a friend and help us spread stories of courageous citizenship and community renewal across Arkansas. And remember, On the Other Hand offers dozens of other interviews like this one. You can find On the Other Hand in your favorite podcast app or on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website, which is arkansas.braverangels.org.
On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, a community of citizens working to depolarize our state, strengthen local communities, and engage with each other across differences.
From your hosts, John O'Brien
and Glenn White,
we invite you to join us in working to build stronger relationships and communities as we work toward a braver Arkansas.